Last year, the Democratic Alliance called the decision to deploy the SANDF to the region as reckless and called for its reversal. Let's speak now to former DA Defence and Military Veterans MEC and Independent Defence Analyst, Kobus Marais. Good morning, Kobus. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Good morning to your viewers.
Firstly, we send our condolences to the families and loved ones of the 9 SANDF soldiers who lost their lives in the eastern DRC. Can you share your thoughts on this tragic incident and its impact on the nation?
Yes, good morning. It is always a very, very sad day when you lose soldiers on the battleground. If my recollection is correct, this is the most soldiers that we have lost in one day since Bangui, and we know that Bangui were a disaster, and it's still haunting us. So it is very, very bad. It's even more sad if you think that all these soldiers are probably, the only people who earn money for their family. So there's a lot of livelihoods and people that has been affected now back home. It's even more sad when you think that if you lose lives and sacrifice lives for your own safety and security in terms of your country and the interest of your country, this is not our war. Let's be honest about that. And it's not a huge bloc that is fighting there. There's only three members of SADC that who are fighting in the DRC. What is making this more unreasonable or illogical, in my opinion, is that the immediate SADC neighbors of the DRC, specifically Angola and Zambia, they are not part of this conflict. And somehow they apparently don't see this as a threat to their safety and security. And certainly we, as the most southern member of SADC, who is taking the biggest burden on our soldiers and in effect sacrificing the most lives, are not affected by this war at all. We are doing business with Kinshasa in terms of trade. Certainly not with the Eastern DRC. There might be certain personal mineral and mining interest in Eastern DRC, but that is not what you must use a soldier's life for. One must also further take into consideration that although I believe that under the circumstances our soldiers were well prepared, the decrease in budget over many, many years certainly must have an effect on the preparations as well. But certainly resourcing is so poor that it's actually a pity that we must again see bodies coming back in body bags and not, coming back to their families in a normal, healthy condition.
Now, are there any intelligence or operational gaps that you think might have led to this tragic outcome?
I don't believe there are intelligence gaps. I mean, all of us back in South Africa knew about the M23s and their new onslaughts. We knew that they were much better prepared this time around than a number of years ago. We know that they are incredibly well resourced compared to many, many years ago when we defeated the M23s. So clearly this is another force that we are reckoned with. And, we know that there is no ways that we as South Africa, with our limited capabilities and resources, will be able to defeat the M23s. The only way that you can resolve this matter is via diplomatic channels. You have to resolve this, and it must be driven by the African Union and the Eastern African Community Bloc. Remember, all those countries, including the DRC, who are hosting all these rebels, those cross-border conflicts, are all members of Eastern African Community Group. And we don't really see them involved. The only Eastern African Community member that is involved is Tanzania, but we know that both Tanzania and Malawi have much smaller contingents as part of the SAMI DRC deployment. And our view was in the past, and I've been very fierce on this, that either you resource your soldiers absolutely perfectly well, or you withdraw them back to South Africa. We must never, ever sacrifice soldiers by under-resourcing them. That is unacceptable, and I think will be part of this negative legacy of the ANC government. Really, this is sad when you are doing this to soldiers.
And speaking of which, Kobus, I mean, the reality is that our men are on the ground. Is the current budget allocation for defense and military spending, is it sufficient to meet the needs of the SANDF and ensure the safety of our soldiers?
Absolutely not. One must remember that although there was an interim more money allocated in the medium-term budget, but that is still probably 1 to 1.5 billion rand less than what our expenses are to have our soldiers in the DRC. One must remember that the ideal division of a budget is 40 to 50% on staff, in other words, the cost of employment. 30% should be spent on training and deployment, and 30% must be spent on the maintenance of equipment, upgrading of equipment, replacing, especially of strategic prime mission equipment. Now, we know that with our current budget, the cost of employees is very, very close to 70%. And if you think that there are still a bit of maintenance that you have to do to some of the equipment, it means that you have got way less than 30% for preparations and deployment. So over many years, this is escalating and it's snowballing to effect that we are very, very poorly resourced. And the budget is the main culprit in that. We should be striving to 1.5% of GDP, at least 1% of GDP, and we know that we are well below 0.7% of GDP currently.
Can we talk about our Air Force? I mean, is the South African Air Force effectively safeguarding the lives of our soldiers in combat zones?
Currently, not at all. Not at all. We know that there are still 3 Oryx helicopters in the DRC. One is we know is the one that was badly damaged during that one attack, and then the other two are not really serviceable at this stage. And without air support to evacuate and medevac our soldiers, send them more ammunition and stuff like that, it is incredibly difficult. We know that in the past, the previous time when we defeated the M23s, the Rooivalk helicopter was critical in that process. However, this time around, we know that there are no Rooivalks anymore. There are no air support regarding the Oryx. So we have got no air support in the DRC, and we must say 0, 0, 0. Back in South Africa, we know that the Air Force has been badly affected by the under-resourcing of the Air Force specifically, but the Defence Force in the bigger concern. Similarly, our Navy is in a very, very bad state. And without an effective Air Force, you cannot send your soldiers into any combat zone. And you can speak to any defense expert, any defense analyst, any defense leader all over the world. If you do not have proper air support, rather not get involved in a conflict where you can have casualties like we've had now the last couple of days.
Are there any other concerns regarding this deployment beyond the specific points that you've already highlighted?
I think the logistical support to our soldiers, we know, is very, very poor. We don't have our own aircraft that is on a regular basis servicing and supporting our soldiers in the DRC. Every time we have to do that, you have to charter huge aircraft at enormous cost for our taxpayers. Now, again, if you look at that, logistical support is critical, ammunition is critical, and we know that at one stage we have run very, very low on new ammunition. And the budget has also got an enormous impact and an effect on our replenishing capabilities of ammunition. So basic equipment, and you talk about really basic equipment like shoes, clothes, tents, those essential stuff for any soldier in any combat zone. If we are not doing it properly, bring them back home, deploy them on our borders, because we currently have got a major concern of the capabilities to protect our land borders, our maritime borders, and our airspace. And charity has to start back at home. And once we are fully resourced, we have got no problem. I've got no problem that we become involved in the regional peacekeeping, but not at the expense of the soldiers and their families, if it doesn't make sense and if it doesn't have a significant importance for the safety and security and integrity of our country.
You've mentioned that our best bet is to take the diplomatic route. What is your proposed strategy for managing South Africa's role in regional peace and security efforts?
Well, listen, I mean, we must play a role when it affects us. We must play an active role in diplomatic, settling over cross-border conflicts, like we might have with Mozambique. But when it doesn't affect us, we must stay out of that. It's not our business. It's not our war. Let the African Union and the East African community deal with that problem with the support and the assistance of the United Nations. Remember, everything that we do currently under SAMI DRC comes from the South African taxpayer's pocket. When we were part of MONUSCO, and we know that there are still a small contingent of MONUSCO in the DRC, we were repaid or refunded on a yearly basis by the United Nations to the extent of about 3/4 of our costs. Currently, our cost has nearly quadrupled, and we don't get any refund on that. And we know that with a smaller and a decreasing budget, but increasing cost, it becomes even more difficult to effectively deploy in a peacekeeping mission where it doesn't affect or directly affect the safety and security of our people and the integrity of our nation. So we have to start by rebuilding our defense force, rejuvenating our defense force. The average age of our soldier of probably 45, 46 years old is just not acceptable. Ordinary soldiers should be in the beginning, or 21, 22 maybe. Our basic soldiers are running in the average age of in the 30s. So we are dealing with a major problem and a concern. And if we do not do that and deal with that decisively, we will have many, many problems for many years to come. And our legacy in Africa will be very bad. And if the president wants to be a statesman in Africa, he has to make sure that we are properly resourcing our defense force, properly equipping them, and making sure that we have got a well-rejuvenated and well-trained soldiers in our defense force.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.